Okay, well, let's start from the top. Today, we're going to do as you know, we're doing Zoom today, so it's a little different than what we've done in the past, YouTube. So on the YouTube ones we've done for the past few weeks, everyone could kind of send me their questions on YouTube, but I thought we'd make this one more interactive so that we can kind of all throw our tidbits in, and you can ask me questions. I'm gonna grill you guys with a few questions today too, because I thought, hey, I want to keep you on your toes and see what you know about wine and stuff like that. So today we're going to talk a little bit about champagne, Chauvet, and we've been tasting one of these at the beginning of each of the tastings for the last few weeks. This is their what's called Millicent 2012, or what they would classify as their vintage champagne. So in order to be a vintage champagne, all the grapes from that year, in this case 2012, can go in the bottle. You can't use grapes or juice from any other previous year. If you look at non-vintage, and I talked a little bit about this last week, non-vintage champagne is usually a blend of at least 2 years. In some cases, it can be 3 years. So they hold back some juice in order to blend. A lot of times, in order to create a style, like a house style. So they want to kind of have a consistent house style year in and year out. So the three main grapes that you're going to find in champagne are Chardonnay. And if it's 100% Chardonnay, it's called a Blanc de Blanc. And we had that, Mark, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago we had that, and that's the Duo by Chauvet. Mm-hmm. The other grape that you're going to find in there is Pinot Noir, and I asked this question of myself last week: why does Pinot Noir go into champagne, and why isn't the champagne more pink? Well, because they just squeeze the grapes mainly, and the juice, they take the runoff of the juice. So in some cases, if they want to make rosé champagne, they will let the skin into the maceration, or in most cases, actually in champagne now, they wait till the champagne's near done, and they'll actually add some Pinot Noir juice into it to create rosé. And then the third grape that you'll see in champagne is Pinot Meunier, and it's often like a Pinot Blanc type grape. In today's champagne, what we have here is a combination of Pinot Noir at 60% and Chardonnay at 40%. And I opened this a little bit earlier because we were getting thirsty waiting for everybody. And but if you're drinking along, what I've discovered with the Chauvet signature is there's a lot of pear and a lot of apple in their champagnes. They're made, I mentioned this before, but Nicolas Chauvet, the family's been producing or been in the wine industry for 500 years in the Champagne region. And for 5 generations, they've been making their own champagne. Nicolas is the brother who works the vineyard, and Claudie is the sister who makes the wine. So they even credit themselves with making rather feminine champagnes, so they're easily approachable, drinkable, young. This has got a lot of minerality. I find a lot of their champagnes have got pear or apple. This has more pear than apple to me, and a little bit of peach as well. Certainly approachable now, good acidity and nice minerality. The 2012 is a pretty good year out of champagne, so you could drink this now, which we're doing, some of us are doing here today, and get some real pleasure out of it. Obviously some food, and I have some in front of me, would complement it very well. And this could easily be put away for 5 or 10 years without a lot of worry. Comments from anyone?
I have to unmute myself for me to talk, but I love the champagne. It's really nice.
Oh, good.
I love it.
Excellent. Okay, so from Champagne, we're going to move over into Bordeaux. And we're not doing a white Bordeaux today. We're going to go straight into the reds. And what I talked about a little bit last week, and I'll just kind of refresh you on it because I think these are important things to know, is that Bordeaux is on the Atlantic. Hey, Galen, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Good, good. Thanks for joining.
Good, yeah.
Jump in with any questions along the way or any comments. So the Atlantic comes in from a tidal estuary system on the river, the Gironde River. and it divides the Bordeaux wine region into two regions. The left bank, as they often call it, which has Medoc and Graves, and then the right, which is Côte de Bourg and Saint-Emilion and places like that. The terrain's quite a bit different. The left bank of Bordeaux is essentially flat. I think the highest point, and I mentioned this last week, is Chateau Montreux, which means Red Mountain, and I think it's like 200 or 300 feet above sea level. It's not very high, so certainly not a mountain as we would know it. The soil composition there is mainly gravel and sand, so it doesn't hold moisture, doesn't hold rain very well. And so what grape does well with that soil is Cabernet Sauvignon. So what you find mainly on the left bank are Cabernet Sauvignon driven wines. Cabernet Sauvignon is probably the male version of grape. It's a big grape, thick skin, likes to hunt. So in this case, it likes to hunt for water. So if you give it moisture at the surface, and the roots don't go down, they don't really like that. So they like to go down and find moisture way down, and they like the rough, tough conditions, I guess, like most men. So what you'll find mainly on the left bank are Cabernet Sauvignon driven wines. But Cabernet Sauvignon, if you've had it just on its own, other than perhaps California, it takes a few years for it to kind of soften. So it's not super approachable in the early part of its life. So what you'll often find on the left bank, and what you'll find all across Bordeaux for that matter, is a blend. And there are actually 6 grapes that are allowed in Bordeaux, 6 red grapes. And so you'll often find Merlot inside of the left bank wines to some degree. And that really softens the wine, gives it a little bit more fruit sometimes, because Merlot is more early drinking, more fruity. And just kind of softens those left bank wines. You get the opposite when you go to the right bank. On the right bank, you're going to get a soil composition that's going to be quite a bit different. It's going to be clay and limestone and more rolling hills. Saint-Emilion, if you've ever been there, is on a hill. Beautiful, beautiful spot, medieval town. So because of that soil composition, it's going to hold more moisture. And the grapes that like that are Merlot. Merlot loves moisture. But if you make 100% Merlot wine, you may be missing some structure and some backbone. So what you'll often see on right bank wines is you'll see some Cabernet Sauvignon put in there in order to give it some structure and some backbone and some ageability to the wine. And then there are 3 and sometimes 4 other grapes that you can blend in and you see to some extent. And when we get to the final wine today, De Gouy, we're going to have another grape that you'll see blended in. Does anybody want to take a guess and tell me what the other red grapes are that are allowed or permitted to be grown and blended into Bordeaux? Anyone? Bunch of shy students here today, I tell you.
I nominate Mark.
Malbec, Mourvedre, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot. What's the other one? Yeah. Cabernet Franc is the other one.
Yeah, so Cabernet Sauvignon, not Mourvedre. I don't think so. Anyways, that's more of a southern France wine that you'll see in the Rhône, Châteauneuf-du-Pape area. But certainly Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot are the top 2. Then you get Cabernet Franc, and Cabernet Franc gives the wine some spice. And when we get to De Gouy today, you're going to see that. But I think it's also the most aromatic, perfumey of all the red grapes. And you'll discover that. I poured the wines out a little bit earlier today. You'll discover that if you get to De Gouy and you have some. Then the other grapes that go in there is Petit Verdot, and it's like black in color. You won't see a lot of this in the wine, 1 or 2%, sometimes for color and some complexity. Malbec is one that you used to see more of, but now you see it mainly in Argentina. And the other one is Cabernet, and don't see a ton of Cabernet much anymore, but it is prevalent and it is allowed to be blended in. So the winemakers will choose the blend each year based on what obviously the terroir and the weather gives them. But of course, every house wants to make its style, and they want to make a style that's kind of consistent from year in to year out. Obviously, you're going to get better years than others. In this case, on the Gibonnet, we're going to try a wine from the right bank on the Côte de Bourg. So the map that Mark sent out today or the other day with the invite is an excellent map, and it shows where all the wines are. And what you'll notice is the Gibonnet is on the right bank, almost right across from the dock. And rolling hills there, slight rolling hills. Lots of Merlot. I think the blend on this, I'm just checking my notes, is 75% Merlot and 25% Cabernet Sauvignon. And the vintage is 2016. So if you look at vintages over the last 2 or 3 decades, some people would compare 89 and 90. And I've had a lot of 89, 90s. 89 was one of the greatest vintages out of Bordeaux. A little more feminine than style than the 1990. Very fruit forward, but tremendous wines and tremendous ageability to them. And if you have some 89s, and Pichon Baron is one of my favorites, and you drink 89 Pichon Baron and you think, man, I just died and gone to heaven. This is so incredibly good. And then beside it, someone hands you a glass of the 1990 Pichon Baron and you go, wow, I can't believe it, but this might actually be better, right? And so 1990 has this kind of backbone structure that takes the fruit from the 89, but gives it just a little bit more something to it. And the vintage that comes after that, that's often compared to 89 and 90, is 2009 and 2010. So 2009, very big, fruity, jammy, fun wines. Maybe not as much acidity in them. Will they age a long time? I think they're going to do exceptionally well. And then you get to 2010 and you go, wow, this reminds me of 89, 90. Just the same wine, but a little bit more and a little bit more backbone and structure. And then the next vintages after that, that kind of similar, I think, are 2015 and 2016. So 2015, nice warm year, really great growing conditions, big jammy fruit. And then you get to 2016 and you have that and more. So 2016 is probably a year that I would, if I had the previous vintages of all of those, so 89, 2009, and 2015, I would drink those before I drank the other ones. So this 2016 will age very nicely. It's I poured this about an hour or so ago, but it's a lovely well. It's a big fruity. You know, I wrote in my notes when I was in Bordeaux, and I know it's on your notes today. This screams of Merlot. So big, jammy, dark purple fruits. Definitely of the black and dark fruit spectrum of blueberry and some blackberry, touch of smoky incense, just a touch of that.
Thomas, which wine is that actually?
The Gibonnet.
The Gibonnet. Okay.
Very nice balanced wine. It doesn't taste super young. It's got enough, it's got some tannins, some chalkiness to it that you can tell it's going to age, but it stays on your palate. The finish kind of lasts a long time. So yeah, I think this is a very good value wine, especially at $33.99. It's ready to go now, and like I said, being 2016 and having enough structure, it's certainly going to stick around for a bunch of years and do well. Maybe add on a little bit more complexity, that's for sure. Any comments? Cheers.
Pair it with.
Okay.
Well, this would go excellent with any kind of red meat for sure. I've got a little bit of charcuterie going here today, and some cheese and some crackers. I've got a little bit of red pepper spread. For an afternoon, I think that's a really good treat. But for a main course, I think anything, I think this is a strong enough wine that could handle even lamb, especially in its youth. It's going to soften if you age it for the next 3 or 4 years. But right now at its early stage, it's just jammy and fruity and fun. Like, I just think this is a fun wine to drink now.
Be fun. And then how is this wine aged and what type of barrels?
Sorry, say that again.
What's the aging process for this wine? What type of barrels?
This would see some oak, but I don't think a ton of oak, and it would probably, I'm guessing now, but most of these wines from the Côte de Bourg area would see maybe 25 to 50% new oak, and then some of it 2 and 3 year old oak that's, and probably about 14 months is the average, somewhere between 14 and 16 months. Some last maybe 12, but I would say probably about 14 months on oak, and then from there into bottle. This
Thank
one
you.
down mentioned a 21-day maceration. So they macerate this. It's called a cold maceration to extract the most color they can out of the grape.
Great.
Great.
Such a fun afternoon wine.
No.
Okay. Any more comments on the Guibonet before we move on?
Mm-mm.
Delicious.
Okay. Now we're going to the Naco. The Borg family. This is in an area called the Entre-deux-Mers. And if you look at Mark's map again, the Gironde River comes in from the Atlantic, and then it splits in two. And when it splits, it becomes the Gargonne River to the south, and to the north, the Dordogne River. And I speak a touch of Spanish, and so mer to me always meant ocean. So when entre-deux is entrance to the two oceans, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I actually looked it up, and it's not mer as in ocean. It's actually short for Mairie, M-A-R-E-E, which is tide in French. So this is the entrance to the two tides. And I mentioned off the top, the Bordeaux region is an estuary system where it's a tidal river. So entrance to the two tides is really what Entre-deux-Mers means. And this is between the two rivers, south of Bordeaux City, I think about 35 kilometers south. Their family, the Borgs, have been making wine now for, I think, 200 years. So they kind of got it right, I think. Pretty big production, but we went there. If you look at their label, it's kind of funny, but you'll see the chateau here, and they have a palm tree, a golden palm tree embossed on top of the chateau. And so before I went there, we were there last fall, Mark and Raji and I was like, I never really noticed it for what it was. And then when we went there with our negotiant, the topic came up, and they actually have a palm tree in front of the chateau. And Lord knows where they got it from, but it's there and it's growing. It doesn't look super tall. It doesn't look as tall as this one, I don't think, in real life. But that just kind of tells you how warm it gets in Bordeaux, that they can easily grow palm trees there. This wine to me is probably the best value wine that we have in our portfolio at $31. Entre-deux-Mers is a mix of soil composition, but again, more closely associated with the right bank than the left bank. But in this case, where they are, Cabernet Sauvignon does exceptionally well. So this wine is made up of vast majority, 65% Cabernet Sauvignon, 35% Merlot. When I tasted this wine, I've been bringing this wine in for, I think the first vintage I brought in was 2009 or 2010, and it was a good wine back then. But when you get through to years like 2015 and 2016. And when I had the 2016, I was like, I should buy as much of this as I can, because it's not going to go bad anytime soon. So I actually, in fact, ordered a pallet of this, which is 56 cases. And I thought, if I have to sit on it for a year, I don't think anybody would be really upset with me if they bought it a year or two from now. They'll be going, man, how do you still got that 2016? And I'll be like, because I bought a pallet of it. So there's lots of this kicking around, and lots of it in our system. And at $31.99, this is what I call your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night. You don't have to be a special occasion to open this at this price point.
How long would you store this one? How long would it be optimal?
Well, I would drink it now because I think it's pretty open, but because I mentioned earlier, it's got a Cabernet Sauvignon base mainly that's going to age probably longer than the first wine. I wouldn't think there would be any hesitation on sticking this away for 5 or 7 years. So pretty easy to age this and open it up and be pretty happy 5 years from now. But the best way I tell people, and I'm a fan of this now myself, is and during these times that we're going through, I've opened some incredible killer wines because I'm like, why do I have 12 of something? What if I get taken out by a car or coronavirus or whatever, right? Maybe I should have 11 of these, right? No matter what the cost is. So yeah, it's like, why don't we just open one now, right? So so what I would recommend people do is if you buy 6 or 12, open one right away and figure out if you like it, right? And if you like it, just keep opening them, right? And if you think it might get better or you're not sure, then stick the other ones away and open one again in, say, 6 months, right? And say, hey, wow, I think this is in a better spot than it was 6 months ago. I'm going to open them all now. Or you might go, hey, I want to see what it turns into 6 months from now, right? Or a year from now. So that's kind of how I drink my wines now when I order them from my personal cellar. And the one thing I get a little scared about is when I open one that I might have forgotten about, and then I kind of go, oh man, I better open the rest real soon because they're either all at a perfect spot or maybe they've gone over their apogee and they're on the way down. So I better get at them now before they go bad, and I just get less enjoyment out of them. So yeah, that would be my advice. Is that my comment would be, it's not going to go bad fast. You probably got 5 to 10 years on it, but drink them over the next 5 or 10 years if you've got 6 or 12, and then just see where they go.
Correct.
Really dark color again, like the first wine, just purple in the glass.
I actually really like that.
So you
I like the aromatics on this a little bit more than I do on the Guibonet.
Thank you.
Definitely black fruits again. Maybe a little bit of olive tapenade, and maybe even a touch of licorice on this.
Did you decant that one that you're drinking right now?
No, I used a Corvin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Corvin.
Actually, I used Corvin on this one. I used it on the first one and the third one because I couldn't. I think there was, for those that have ever wanted to try, this is a Corvin, and it was designed by, I think it was a vascular surgeon, but it allows you to put a needle through the cork and you insert argon gas, and then you can pour out a glass of wine. And even Robert Parker's done this study to say that in this case, if you had, say, a glass out of it, it keeps the wine in its original state. So if you're trying to try wine, and where this has become instrumental is if you're doing tastings, and especially if you're in a trade and you're going around to restaurants, you don't want to be opening a bottle every time. So the idea behind the Corvin is that you can keep the wine in the bottle as fresh as you can over a period of, they say, for up to years. And Parker's even endorsed them and said it's worked. But I've never gotten that far. I've only done it for tastings. I figure if you get halfway through the bottle, you may as well just drink the other half. So that's just so. Anyways,
Yeah.
Mark, what I'm going to tell you is I tried the Corvin today, and I don't know if it was because there was too much wine in the neck of the bottle. I couldn't get the wine out of the Nicot. I couldn't get it out, so I just opened the bottle. But I could. The Corvin worked excellently on the Guibonet and on the Gris.
And it's not out of gas? That's weird.
Yeah. I tried 2 different cylinders of argon to think maybe one was out, and couldn't get it out. So maybe I was just doing something wrong.
Maybe they have a different cork. It's a little bit longer or something.
Yeah, but it was really high in the neck. What I noticed, the fill was super high. So I was just wondering if that maybe had something. There was just not enough room for the argon to get in or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anybody drinking this now?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
So,
Yeah, I like the aromatics. I'm going back to the first one, but first one's nice, a little muted compared to this. To me, this is
You lost Wi-Fi?
got a really nice nose.
Nice. We have unlimited minutes now.
Cool.
I think the Gibonnet on the it's got a longer finish for me. It kind of hangs on your palate. The Nicot is a little more simplified to me. It's I like the aromatics better, but I like on the palate. I think I like the Gibonnet a little bit more, especially the finish. The Nicot, still a very good wine, and like I said, a really good value wine, but not quite as long a finish as the Gibonnet. Pretty good though. And I think part of that is, my guess is because of the high content of Cabernet, that it hasn't really softened out yet. It needs maybe another year or so to really soften out. It would be interesting to see what this is like in a year and compare it to the Gibonnet. But obviously the Gibonnet is going to be a little bit more open for business now because it's got a high Merlot content of about, I think 75%, I said, whereas this Merlot content, I think, is about 35. So that cab is still pretty tight, but aromatically, it's very, very beautiful.
Could you lightly chill either of those wines before you have it with you?
I stuck them in the fridge. So just for those of you that ask about red wine and room temperature, I always find, especially at restaurants, that the wine is always way too warm, and especially if it's in a restaurant that's not a great restaurant and it's coming off a shelf. So I've asked so many times over the years if they can stick my red wine in an ice bucket for 5 or 10 minutes, or just pour as a small amount so we're drinking a little bit, and then jam the rest in an ice bucket. And but for my wines at home, I either take them straight out of my cellar, which is at 13 degrees Celsius here, or in this case, I stuck these in the fridge this morning. And left them in the fridge, and then I took them out about an hour before we started, and that's when I poured them, and now they're at a perfect temperature. They would be just below room temperature, and obviously they're going to warm up quick with the warm day today. So yeah, to answer your question, Mark, I often chill my red wines. Okay, any more comments or questions on the Nicot before we move over to the Deguy? Okay, so Chateau Deguy is an old Roman fortress that goes back at least, I think, back to the time of Christ, I guess. But it's the Romans were a big part, I think, of Bordeaux way back. And when we went to Deguy this year, Mark and Raji and I, we saw some of the ruins that they have kind of cordoned off, and they actually have goats living in these ruins. It's kind of interesting, and but I can't remember what was from the 14th or 15th century that some of those buildings were.
14th sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The owner of Chateau Deguy is a count from. He's German. He's like one of the most charismatic guys I've ever met. A guy named Count Stefan von Liebberg. He kind of sticks out like a sore thumb in Bordeaux because he's a German hanging out in the French area, and but he comes from an honest, hardworking wine family that goes back generations in Germany. And his epiphanal moment, he says, in wine was that Canon Lagaffe from Saint-Emilion, he drank, I think it was in 1953 when he was in his 20s. He's 63 now, I think, Stefan, and he said that was his epiphanal moment, and he said he knew he had to be in Bordeaux. He packed up his wife and they moved to Bordeaux in 1985, and they've got 3 children. He bought Canon Lagaffe, and he also bought La Ortie, and he bought Le Mondeau. Le Mondeau on the right bank is considered like a garage wine. It's only 11 acres, very, very small production. Some people don't like Le Mondeau because they think it's made in an American kind of extracted fruit Napa style, but a lot of people like it. So, and it sells pretty expensively. Le Mondot sells for oftentimes $200-300 US a bottle, obviously because of the small production. He uses a very famous winemaker there, Stefan Duranicourt, to make his wine. Stefan's a real character. I brought him in for about 6 years. I was the cellar master for the Commanderie de Bordeaux in Vancouver. So I brought him in, and they had a group called La Cinq, the Five, which was make up Ponte Canet is no longer there. They got snobby, but the Balancourt family from Chateau Gazin, which is right next to Chateau Petrus. The late Patrick Meritot, who came from Brainerd de Creux. Smith Oak Lafitte is part of that five, and then Canon Lagafouille, Count Stefan von Nieperg. So the four of them came to Vancouver. We did a dinner we had about 60 people come to it, and it was at the Five Sails restaurant. And we served their wines, of course. It was a hassle getting them because, of course, everyone thinks it's just show up like America and bring your wine. And we all know the customs and regulations here. So they all shipped the wine through their agent in Seattle, who shipped it up to Blaine. I went and got the wine in Blaine and paid through the nose on duty in order to get it. But at least we had the wine for the dinner. Stefan is the craziest dresser in the world. He is very, very flamboyant. He likes velour and felt and all these crazy colors, big lapels, cravats, everything. And when I went there, not this past year, but about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I took my friends from Toronto there, and I said, wait till you meet Stefan von Nieperg. He's going to be exotically strange and fun and flamboyant, and it's going to be just such a fun time, right? And he just loves to dress up. And so we went to Canon Lagafouille, and he shows up and he's wearing jeans and a brown leather jacket. And my friend Chris from Toronto goes like, really? This is the guy? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I thought this guy was supposed to be Mr. Flamboyant. And I go, Chris, I don't know what to say, man. I've been in his company a couple of times, but he's a really cool dude. Anyway, so he invited us, and I knew this in advance, but he invited us for lunch in his chateau, which is very much a German Bavarian house in all ways, inside and out. And it's right at Canon Lagafouille. And so he brought us into the garden, introduced us to his lovely wife, and they were serving all these hors d'oeuvres. They had a couple of waiters running stuff and champagne, and he disappeared. And he came back about 15 minutes later, and I looked at my friend Chris after looking at Count Stefan and went, aha. And now he had gotten all dressed up. So he had on like green velour with big lapels and a cravat, funny shoes, almost like leprechaun twisty shoes. And so Chris looked at me and said, okay, finally we got what we came for, right? And I go, yeah. So he's eccentric and fun, and if you Google him, you'll read some great articles about him. He's just a really fun, positive guy to be around. Never heard a bad thing come out of his mouth. I've been in his company, I guess, about 4 or 5 times now. I was down in, actually, Rajni and I, was it 2 summers ago, we were down at Harlan Estates, and we actually got a private sitting at Harlan, and Bob Levy is the winemaker there.
Yeah, that was a gorgeous estate.
It's just gorgeous. I've been buying Harlan forever. Sorry, go ahead, Rajni.
No, I said we still have pictures of that.
Yeah.
You have that.
So Bob Levy came out and spent a day with us. They had a bottle of Krug waiting for us on the deck, and then and he started telling some stories about Stefan von Nieperg as well. So he's definitely an eccentric guy, fun guy, flamboyant, as I said, but also a perfectionist. So Canon Lagafouille is probably, I think would be his flagship wine to me, although he may get more praise sometimes for Le Mondot, but Canon Lagafouille also has a ton of history. So it goes way back. I don't know what year Canon Lagafouille started, but I have some 82s and 90s in my cellar that are still drinking exceptionally well and still have 10 or 20 years ahead of them. So this is his pet project. He spent so much money on this. If you Google the estate, Chateau de Guy, it is just an absolute piece of magic. It's lots of stone, lots of brick. The cellars, the winemaking area, the stainless steel vats. Like, I don't know what he spent in terms of money, but it is a ton. And so he's committed to making this wine a great wine. It's on the right bank, and you can actually kind of see Saint-Emilion from where it is, but it's not part of Saint-Emilion. It's very, very close to the border. And so the region's called Côte de Castellon. And this is the 2015 vintage. So again, going back to my comments, a little bit more fruit forward. This is 85% Merlot and 15% Cabernet Franc. And as I mentioned earlier, really strong aromatics on this. Cabernet Franc's always got this very perfumey nose to me. Yeah, this is a real step up from the other two. Although I like the other two, but this is going up a notch for sure in quality. Again, from the dark fruit spectrum, and that's because you've got all this Merlot content in there. Almost a little bit of chocolate there, a little bit of, yeah, definitely some dark chocolate. But yeah, just a very aromatic nose. Lots of structure. The Cabernet Franc often gives a little bit of spice. Approachable now, but I think it's got a higher tannin structure, certainly than the first two wines. I think this wine, I would open it now and enjoy it, but I wouldn't drink it on its own. I would definitely have food with it. I think you would be doing this wine a disservice to just drink it on its own. Although you could enjoy it on its own, but I think if you had food, this wine would do way better. And I think if you gave this wine 2 or 3 years, even better yet. But certainly this is just a very, very elegant wine. We've ordered in, by the way, some of the 2016s as well. So we're going to have those in probably the fall or something like that, I believe, right, Mark? Or
once we run out of the 2015, the 2016 will be available.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we only have about 40 bottles left of the 2015.
Yeah, I think we have 40 bottles left of this, and then we have already reserved the 2016 to come in. And
yeah, well, it's already here actually. We just can't
is it here?
tell it until we're out of the 2015.
Okay, good. And we drank the 2016 when we were in Bordeaux, did we not?
Yeah, we drank a bunch of vintages. I think we
Yeah.
had the 2010, 2015, 16, and then I think we had the 2018 as well.
If you want to, Mark included the video. I interviewed Stefan, so it's on your link your link today that he sent you, or no, it's on the invite that you sent out, and the one that we mentioned. But if you click on that, it's not a short video. I think it's 12 or 13 minutes, but you'll get a feel for Stefan and what he's trying to do at De Guy. De Guy means, and he mentions this, needle. So he said, I couldn't change the name. People would, kill me if I changed the name. So he just went in and he decided to make a big investment in this estate. I think it's a huge estate. We were there, the day we were there, it was like 35 degrees Celsius. It was just hot as heck. But he's done everything right. Like, there's a small creek that goes by. He's got his own like a huge size compost, because he wants to be environmentally friendly. Like, he spent so much money on this to make it work, and I think it's showing in the wines. And I think once this estate comes along in the next 5 or 10 years, they're going to make even better and better and better wines. I think he's trying to get it up to about 300 acres of production is kind of his plan. But yeah, this is a pretty good wine for, I think, a pretty good price too. I can't remember what this is, $79. So it's still not in that $100, $150 category, which would be for, if you go to Ken and Lagafouille, I don't know what that would be in Canadian dollars, but I'm guessing it would be 150 to 200 for most of the Ken and Lagafouille. So this would be, you know, half or less of what those sell for, and still, you know, pretty top quality for me. We were actually lucky to get this because when I met him, and him and I get along really well. We seem to click, and I asked him, I said, can I get any of this? And most of you may or may not know that you can't have more than one agent in most cases for a wine in British Columbia. So wasn't sure if anybody had this wine already, and we were able to snag 20 or 30 cases of it, of the 2015 and as we said earlier, the 2016 as well. So feel pretty privileged that we're able to get this, and I think if I had this, I would drink one now, but with food. But the other ones I would let sit for 2 or 3 years if you have time to do that. Any comments? Anyone want to share anything?
What's the ageability on it? Because Cabernet is usually used as a grape because it can age really well. There's no Cabernet in this wine, so does that change the ageability?
I would say no, because of the quality of the wine. If you look at what I mentioned, his other one, Ken and Lagafouille,
yeah,
it's predominantly Merlot. And I've got 82s and 90s, as I mentioned, that still got a ton of life ahead of them. So no, I think if you taste the tannin structure of this, you get that tardiness, and you realize that's going to need some time to soften, to give this wine what it really wants to show.
Mm.
So I would say this wine's good for 10 years at least or more if you wanted to put some away. Yeah, I don't think just because it's a Merlot wine, it's not going to, there's lots of Merlot wines that will age for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So, but, if you look at what Bordeaux does is they don't put all their fruit in a wine. They'll be very selective on what they put in. So they'll take their best wine. Like if you look at even like pick on the first gross for a minute, and although the first gross mass produced, they might take 40% of their overall production and put it in their main wine. And then they'll have a second wine or a third wine, or they'll sell off juice or whatever they do with it. So it comes down to selection, right, of grapes. So I'm pretty sure that in the case of Deguy, they're using probably their best grapes, and they're selling some of the secondary stuff off. And that's why you're going to get a wine that's going to age more, is because they're using the best fruit. They're not, not to pick on the first two wines at all, because I really like them. But the first two wines are more made of early enjoying drinking the first 5 years or so of their lives. In some cases, in the case of Nicot, higher production. They're not going to necessarily sell off a lot of their secondary juice. They're just going to make more wine in that year. And in 2015, 2016, they make great wines. Whereas when you get into someone like Chateau Deguy, they're going to be a lot more selective on what goes into the first run, what goes into their juice. And if you look at the legs on this, if you're spinning it around, the glycerin on this is something else in my glass. It's just kind of slowly dripping down. So it's I don't get that so much on the Nicot, but this wine's got lots of legs, as they would say. So it's a lot going on in this wine, and enjoyable now with food, but lots of time ahead of it. Galen, any comments? Any questions?
Not yet. No, I'm writing down notes though.
Which one's your favorite, Galen?
Of all the vineyards that you've talked or chateaus that you've talked about, which one would you say would be the funnest to visit?
Oh,
Good question.
of these ones today, definitely you want to go see Stefan von Nieperg and his crew. And if you want to go to Bordeaux, I can set you up. So I've been going to Bordeaux since 2012, and I've never had a better card than my card that said I was the Celerier or the cellar master for the Commander de Bordeaux in Vancouver. So there's 100 chapters of the Commander de Bordeaux in the world. And the cellar master is the one who buys the wine for each local chapter. So I had between 40 and some years $100,000 a year to spend strictly on Bordeaux for the Vancouver group.
Yeah.
The difference in what I had to spend was based on how many new members came in, because we had dues obviously every year. But that card is like a golden ticket in Bordeaux, because I remember going to De Creux, I forget the winemaker's name there, and he spoke very little English, and I spoke really crappy French. And we did a whole tasting through De Creux Bocaillou, which is an incredible estate, incredible wine. And at the end, I forget this gentleman's name. He walked me to my car, and I said, "Well, thank you so much. It's been an incredible day." And he goes, "No, monsieur." He says, "It is not you that must thank me. You have it wrong," he says. "It is me that must thank you." And I said, "Oh," and I looked at him, and he said, "Yes." He said, "Oui." He goes, I only make the wine, but you, monsieur, you are the one who is my ambassador, who sells the wine around the world, right?" And I was like, wow, that was like a really cool statement, right? I was with this guy from the Calgary Commander de Bordeaux, and we like drove home like kids, like we were 10 feet off the ground, just feeling so good about ourselves. Saying, no one will believe that we spent an entire afternoon at De Creux, and so it was really cool. So if you want to go to Bordeaux, I have the negociant that I have there is Compagnie Medicaine, which is owned by AXA. They actually own Pichon Baron. They actually own Quinta de Novo, the top port house in Portugal. They own Village, Chateau Village, Petit Village in Bordeaux. What else do they own? But they're very connected. Every time I've gone to Bordeaux, they've set me up, and definitely having my card being the cellar master has opened a lot of doors for me. But listen, I've sent so many people there that have reached out to me and had such great experiences, because there was one thing that I'll tell you about the Bordelais is, and the French generally speaking, is they want to make you feel so good, right? I mean, they want to go out of their way to make you feel good. And I sometimes compare I went on a trip a few years ago, and I went to Smith Haute Lafitte, and it's owned by Florence and Daniel Catillard. And if you remember, for those of us that are older, Jean-Claude Killy, the famous French skier in 1970, and the French ski team won the Olympic gold that year. Well, both Danielle and Florence, his wife, who are now in their mid to late 70s, were on that ski team. So they're Olympic gold medalists.
Oh, cool.
And they got married, and Daniel parlayed his money into I think it was a grocery store, and then expanded that, sold it off. Then he did the same thing in the sporting goods empire and sold it off. And then he bought Smith Haute Lafitte. And his one daughter runs the Raleigh award-winning chateau across the street from Smith Haute Lafitte. His other daughter has a cosmetics line out of Paris called Caudalie, I think it is, big cosmetics line. Anyways, I was there one day with him, and he had been part of that the Sank I told you about that came into Vancouver. And he's got this James Bond cellar. If you can Google it, you might see it. But the floorboards open up in his tasting room like that, and you walk down into this dungeon, and it's all the different wines they've had as far back as he could buy them. And we did a tour of the facility, and as we're walking along the turret of the top of the chateau, and we're going to have lunch, by the way, in his kitchen with his wife and the head of Compagnie Medicaine, our negociant, a guy named George Alsalter, I look out and I see two flags. and they're flying in the air. And one of them is the yellow and blue flag of Smith Oat Lafitte. And I was like, wow, that looks really cool. And they've got this, they always buy a piece of art when they have a good vintage. So they have this huge hare, rabbit that's in motion, that's a statue that's out there too. And the other flagpole has a Canadian flag. And I think this is on 2012 or 13 or 14. And I look out and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. They got a Canadian flag going on. So I look at Danielle and I said, Danielle, I go, and by the way, there was Americans in our group. We had a small group of about 8 of us. And I look out and I said to him, who do you have coming today? Like, obviously you have some Canadian dignitary or somebody like Stephen Harper was the prime minister at the time. Is Stephen Harper coming today? And he goes, pardon, monsieur? And I go, well, you have this Canadian flag going on, right? And he looks at me and he goes, but of course, monsieur, we flew the flag for you, right? And I was like, wow, that was like the coolest thing in the world, right? And I was like my friends were there. We're all just like shaking our heads going, wow, there's 4 Americans in our group and the 4 of us. And the Canadian flag's up there flying. Like, we were feeling pretty good about ourselves. And even the Americans are going, wow, you guys must be really important if you got your flag up. And we're going, I didn't expect that. It was a big surprise. So the French will make you feel, just as a commoner coming in to try wines, if you get an introduction to them, they'll make you feel like $1 million. It's one of the great things that they do. And Rajni was there for the first time this past year, and Mark was there, and I've experienced it now so many times. But you walk around with a big smile on your face, but they just think you're a dignitary, and they just they treat you well, and it doesn't matter if you're in the wine business or not. The French are exceptionally good at diplomacy and making you feel really important. So to answer, that was a long answer to your question. I would definitely, of these 3, I would go to Chateau de Guy, because it's an incredible, beautiful estate, and you would love it. And if you happen to meet Stefan, or if I could help to arrange for Stefan van Dieper to meet you, that would, I'm sure, would make your trip.
No, that would be amazing. We were actually supposed to be in Bordeaux 10 days ago, and clearly did not go.
Oh no!
It's been a great modification of our Bordeaux experience.
Yeah, it's a bummer, but we'll all get back to where we were, I'm pretty sure. But I can help you in any way. I introduce everybody to. There's a lady named Christine that works at Company Medicaid, and I just send her the details of your trip, and she'll come back to you and just say, what days do you have free? How many states do you want to see in a day? Like, they'll set you up for 4 or 5, but I've discovered it's a lot of work hitting 4 or 5 in a day, because by the time you hit 2 in the morning, you're slightly tipsy, and then you're having lunch. You do one or maybe 2 in the afternoon, and all you're thinking about before you go for dinner is having a nap. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 2 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon is probably perfect. So when we were there last time, we did left bank one day, obviously, and then right bank another day. But you could easily spend 5 or 10 days in Bordeaux and not be upset. The downtown core is mainly a walking district now, so they've got above ground monorail. Bordeaux used to be just a really dirty city that was a real, port city, and they had a mayor about 15 years ago that came in, gutted the place as far as all the dirt was concerned, power washed all the buildings, made most of the streets downtown pedestrian only, and there are 3 major universities in Bordeaux, so there's a lot of young people there, so it has this vibrancy when you're walking around. I like Bordeaux better than Paris, only because probably I've been to Paris so many times, and I find it kind of overwhelming. And after I'm in Paris for 2-3 days, I'm kind of done. But Bordeaux for me is like a really small version of Paris, and friendlier, and it's, to get out from downtown Bordeaux to the wine region is anywhere from 10 minutes to maximum, if you're going all the way over to Saint-Emilion, maybe 45 minutes. So maybe a little longer if you go way up the Medoc on the left side, maybe an hour, but everything's certainly drivable, and just a great experience. I would get to Bordeaux as many times as you can.
Yeah, in my experience, because it was my first time going to Bordeaux in September, I loved it. And I think I would choose Bordeaux over Paris anytime. If I'm going to Europe and if I'm going into that region, I would definitely pick Bordeaux over Paris. It was one of my favorites. It was nice and hot. The restaurants were really nice. The shopping is really good too. Yeah. So all the wineries that we went to, the states that we went to, is beautiful. Everybody's very hospitable. And yeah.
Wow.
Feedback. Okay, well, next week we're going to take on Italy a little bit. We're going to do some, I can't remember what's in there, Mark. Is it Ghirardelli and Boscarelli?
We're doing all three. We're doing Poggio al Sala as well.
Okay, good. So next week we're going to head south and we're going to head into Italy. And I'll tell you, I'll save a good story. Luca Ghirardelli and I have become good friends over the last bunch of years. I've been bringing his wines in since I think 2012 or 2013 as well. And I'll save my Luca Ghirardelli story for next week, but it'll be a good comparison. After I've told you everything about the French today, I'll tell you something about the Italians next week. And I'm sure it'll make you smile.
Sounds good.
Okay, so is everybody happy about Easter and staying indoors and hugging your spouse and your kids and enjoying the weekend? I think the weather's supposed to be spectacular.
Well, thank you very much. That was great.
Yeah,
Good. Thanks for joining.